this signifies you have not done anything wrong, and you can go ahead and test run the purifier. Otherwise don't do it. You do not start from this side of the partition, you start from this side of the partition. If you start from here, you might end up breaking the lock ring. It's written here. So if there's no drill mark, there will be a number which will be facing this pin. If there's a drill mark here, it should align with the pin on the ball body. I hope it's visible. But in my case, there was no drill mark. So if there's no drill mark, there will be one thing which you can check. It's not written in the manual, but it was told to me by a senior, and I always do it, and I've never had troubles. So maybe you can also follow this tip. When you're putting the holder, hello everyone, I'm planning on making a set of videos regarding overall of Alfa Laval purifiers. So I'll start with intermediate overalls, then I'll proceed to major overalls. So in all these videos, what we're going to do is we will go through these manuals that I have with me. We will go through these manuals step by step, and then I have a set of videos as well, which will help you visualize what these things actually look like and what we're supposed to do. Plus, I have a set of tips and tricks which I learned while I was doing these overalls on board. So the manuals have most of the important things. So always RTFM, read the freaking manual before you do anything. But these tips and tricks will definitely help you do it better. So while I was doing these overalls, let's say I realized, okay, I should have checked this clearance, but it was not written in the manual. But now I know what all things are supposed to be checked, which are not even written in the manual, but they will definitely be helpful for you when you're actually doing them on board. So if it's your first time joining vessels with Alfa Laval purifiers on them, these videos will be like Bible for you. You go through these videos, and you will have nothing to worry about. So without further ado, let's start. Okay, so let's start with the frame hood removal. But first things first, you need to isolate the purifier properly before you start any overhaul. So for overhauling, let me quickly go through what I used to do. You need to stop the breaker for feed pump. You need to stop the breaker for purifier. You need to isolate oil inlet outlet. You need to isolate water inlet. You need to isolate sludge outlet, and you need to isolate steam inlet for the heater if it's a lube oil purifier, or if it's an HFO purifier. Now let's go for frame hood removal. So this is a frame hood, the red part. So let's see what the manual says. So it says to remove connections before starting the dismantling. But before this, there's a very important thing that I want to share. When you're removing these connections, you make sure you make a marking if it's your first time doing it. So there are different connections. You see these three holes. There are different connections and they all have a different meaning. So like let's say one is for oil inlet, one is for oil outlet, one is for water outlet. And when you're removing it, if you don't make a marking, and while putting it back, if you put oil inlet to the hole which is related to oil outlet, I'm not sure if it's actually possible to do it, but okay, it's still safer to make a marking before you do anything like this. So better make markings. Wait, I'll show you what it looks like. You see these three pipes, they are connected to three holes, all have a different purpose. So you don't want to put this pipe in this hole. So better make sure you make markings in these, especially if it's your first time doing it. I'm not sure if it's possible to fuck this up, but this will be a very silly mistake and it will be hard to explain to seniors if you do it. Okay, so you start removing these connections. Everything is isolated. So you remove these connections, and this is how you remove them. You open these nuts, these bolts, and you remove this plate, then you just pull them out. There'll be a circlip here. Just pull them out and they'll come out. So keep a rack below these pipes to avoid creating any mess. Then you tie these three together somewhere. Now, oh yes. One important thing before you do this. So what the manual says is you remove these connections, then you remove the lock nut using the hook spanner. But before you do this, there's one very important tip. The guys who have done Mitsubishi purifiers are aware of this, but the guys who have not, this is a very important tip. Before you remove any lock nuts or anything, it's wise to take a clearance first. I'll try to see if I can uh, show you which clearance. A distance, yes. So you see this height. So from the top, you want to measure this height. So this will help you when you assemble it back. When you assemble it back and this height is the same, this signifies you have not done anything wrong, and you can go ahead and test run the purifier. Otherwise don't do it. Just call a senior and see what you have done wrong. Now it says to remove this lock nut and the washer. In the manual it says to remove the lock nut using the hook spanner and the washer. Now one important thing with this lock nut is there's a right way of putting it and there's a wrong way of putting it. You see this? There's a right way of putting this guy and there's a wrong way of putting this guy. So make a marking. Don't put it upside down. Okay, so now we go to the removal of spring and the arm. For this, two or three important things. Before you do anything, I want you to take a photo of this assembly when you're doing it. Just take a photo of this because it's a bit more complicated than it looks. When I was doing it for the first time, when I was assembling it back, it became a bit confusing for me. Okay, I might be a bit dumber than you guys, but still, taking a photo of this will help you for sure. And one very important thing, there's a right way of putting this spring and there's a wrong way of putting this spring. This I will share with you when we're doing the assembly video. Okay, let me just show you how the spring goes. Yes, so this you can find in the assembly part of the manual. You see, there's a right way of putting this spring and a wrong way of putting this spring. Take a photo, take your time. The difference is here. The difference is here. You see how these two are facing inside and not outside. So before removing the spring, you check this. Okay, if you're having some trouble visualizing it, let's watch the video quickly. So you remove the lock nut. Make sure you don't put it upside down while putting it back. Now you remove this part. Use a mallet. Take this guy out. And now the spring. Take a photo of this assembly. You remove the spring. You take this part out. And it's very important to turn the pairing tube in like he did right now. Because if you don't turn the pairing tube in and you try to remove the frame hood, okay, this needs a bit of clarification. If you try to remove this part, the pairing, the frame hood, without turning uh, the pairing tube inside, you see, he's turning this pairing tube inside. If you try to remove the frame hood without turning the pairing tube inside, you might break the pairing tube. So be careful. Okay, so let's talk about lock ring removal. What is this lock ring? This lock ring is the thing which is holding bowl hood and bowl body together. So you see the lock ring. You just took out the lock ring. This is the lock ring. This is holding the bowl body and the bowl hood together. So when you remove this lock ring, you can take out this bowl hood. And when you take this bowl hood out, then you get the top disc, disc stack, and all those things. So now we will see how do we remove this lock ring. Now, some things which we need to pay attention to here are, so let's just talk about the procedure first, then I'll tell you what all things we need to pay attention to. So fit the compression tool A. This is A. Just I'll just zoom it. You fit this compression tool A, then you fit the clamps and the screws B. This is the clamp, this is the screw which you use to fit the clamp. And then you use this compression tool A. You use it to compress the disc stack. Disc stack. Once you compress the disc stack, you can take out the lock ring. After you take out the lock ring, you can take out the bowl hood from the bowl body. So I'll show you the video so you can visualize it better. While taking out the lock ring, there are some important things that we need to discuss. But first, I'll show you what to install, how to install. You see, so he's installing the compression tool. You install the compression tool like this, and then you put these clamps in. Now, there's one very important thing that you need to check here. While putting the clamp, you need to make sure. Okay, so this is the clamp, right? And there are so many holes that you can put it in. You can put it in any of these holes. That's what she said. So you have so many options. But while putting this clamp, you need to make sure that you don't cover this threaded hole, because this threaded hole will be used to take out the lock ring later. So if you put this clamp in this hole, then you will end up covering this threaded hole, and then later you won't be able to take out the lock ring. So this is one very important information that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so now clamp is in place. You tighten this clamp using these bolts. Now we are going to compress the disc stack. To compress the disc stack, there are two holes. One is this one is this one. To compress the disc stack, we use the inner hole. The outer hole is for a different purpose. This is to lift this ball. So outer hole we will not use right now. We will use the inner one. Okay. Then you take the torque wrench, you tighten these bolts from top alternately, increasing them in uh, sets of 5 Newton meters. First, you set the this torque wrench to 5 Newton meter, then you tighten all these three bolts alternately until they reach 5 Newton meter. Then you proceed with 10 Newton meter, 15 Newton meter, 20 Newton meter. Now, disclaimer, different models have different torques required. So always RTFM. Take your manual with you. Read the manual. What is written there. This video is good for you to know what you're supposed to check while doing it. But the values will always differ. So you check your manual. What is the actual value of the torque required at different stages. So see, now everything is tightened to 20 Newton meter. This means the disc stack is now compressed. So now we can take out the lock ring. To take the lock ring, we put these dismantling bolts, threaded holes. Now, one important thing again, this is the guide pin in the body. I hope it's visible. The guide pin in the body. And this is the partition in the lock ring. Lock ring is not a circle. It's like a circle which is broken in one side. Okay, I'll show you the diagram. That'll be better. Okay. So you see, this is the partition, and this is this dismantling screw which we are putting right now. And this is the pin which is on the lock ring. So there's a particular direction in which you will start tightening these screws. What is that direction? You will start from this side and go in anti-clockwise direction if we see the diagram right now. So you do not start from this side of the partition, you start from this side of the partition. If you start from here, you might end up breaking the lock ring. So it's very important to start from this side of the partition, this side of the partition. Okay, let me simplify it. So there's a partition in the lock ring. Now there are two sides. One is this side, one is this side. Which side will you start tightening these screws from? You will always start from the side which is opposite to the pin. You will always start from the side which is opposite to this. So you start from here, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. This is how you do it. If you do it the other way, the lock ring will be damaged for sure. I've seen many people break
Okay,
lock
so this
rings
video
because
is
of this
getting a bit
mistake,
long. It's
and it's
already
written in
25
the manual.
minutes. I don't want to
So
drag it any
always read the
further.
manual. See, it's
I'll
written.
share
Start
all the
with the
next parts
screws
in a
nearest to the
different
lock
video.
ring end,
I'll post a
the
part 2
one
for the
without the pin,
dismantling.
and then
Thanks for
continue
watching the
around
first part.
until the other end
Stay
is reached.
stay tuned for the second
So
one.
it's very
I think
important
I'll
to
post them
understand
together,
this line.
so
This is
no
very
need to
important.
wait for the other
Now I'll
one.
show you in the video what he's doing.
Thank you for listening.
You see, this here is the pin. This is the pin in circle, correct? And this is the partition, yeah. And so he's starting from not from this side, but from this side of the partition. And then now he will go in this direction, this direction. He will go in this direction, not this direction, this direction. Wow, what a tool. Now we will continue doing this until, yeah, see, the lock ring is now out. Now we will use that tool again, the compression tool. But this time we'll be using bigger bolts, and we will be putting these bolts in the outer holes of the tool. These holes, and not the inner ones. See, he's putting it in the outer holes, outer holes, outer hole. And then you start tightening them slowly, 45-degree each, 45-degree each, slowly, slowly, so that the bowl hood comes up straight and not at an angle. And then you can use your hands or the chain block depending on the size of purifier to take the bowl hood out. Now this is how you will take the main seal ring out. You will use a drift to take the main seal ring out, then you will use a special tool. You can use any soft metal to take this main seal ring out. Just make sure you don't use a screwdriver or anything hard. You don't want to damage the bowl hood while taking out the seal ring. So he's using aluminium here. You see, this is aluminium. So you can use aluminium or brass, but don't use some hard metal to take the main seal ring out. Otherwise, you will have troubles maintaining seal later. So this is how you take the seal ring step. So now he has already taken the outlet pipe and the top disc out. Let's see what the manual says. So I'll just check. Okay, so here the manual says to just take out the inlet outlet pipe along with top disc. But there's one thing that we need to check before doing this, which will help. So there's one thing that we need to check before doing this, which will help us when we are assembling it back. I'll show you in the, I think it'll be in the assembly part of the manual. So the drill mark on top disc should face the guide pin on the bowl body. What does this mean? There's supposed to be a drill mark on the bowl body which should align with the guide pin on. There's supposed to be a drill mark here which will align with a pin on this body. They haven't shown it here, but I have a video for sure where I've taken this. I hope it's visible. You see, on the top disc, there will always be a drill mark or a number. I'm not sure if it's visible right now. You can see there's a number 256 written here. So if there's no drill mark, there will be a number which will be facing this pin. If you can see the pin on the ball body, you see next to my finger. I'll try to zoom it in if I can. There's a pin on the body, you see. And always before removing the top disc, you try to move it left and right. Just get a feel of how much it moves. If it moves, so when you're putting it back, if it doesn't move at all, there's a problem. If it moves too much, there's a problem. It's not sitting correctly. So before removing, it's always better to check how much it moves, what is the clearance. So in this video, you see, before taking out the top disc, I'm checking how much it's moving. And now I know how much it moves. So when I put it back and it moves the same way, I know everything is right. Okay, so now let's talk about the removal of pairing tube from inlet outlet pipe. This is your pairing tube. This part here is your pairing tube. Now two things to focus here. I'll quickly tell you. So there's a right way of putting the splash sealing and there's a wrong way of putting it. So you make sure you don't put it upside down. This guy. See, the bottom part is tapered but the top part is not. And then another thing, while removing the pairing tube, you need to know how to strike it. So you have to strike it from the bottom. So you strike it from here. There's a hole here. You strike it from here and this will come up. Okay. I've seen people bend this part. This part, it gets bent like this. Because people while removing it or while putting it, they strike it from here or from here for removal. And this, what this ends up doing, it bends this part in this way. So you strike from here. There's a hole at the bottom. You put a drift there and you strike it with a mallet. Okay. Then after this you remove the distributor. Anyway, if you can't visualize it, I'll show you the video. So next part, for removal of disk stack and distributor, there are some important things. You assemble this tool with the pin for removal, but for putting it back, we don't need the pin. Okay, I'll talk about that in the assembly video. But you assemble this tool like this. I'll show you the video. It'll be clear how to use this tool to remove the distributor. But one very important thing, which is not written in the manual here, not in the disassembly part, but it's written in the assembly part. Before removing the distributor, uh, we need to check. Okay, I'll show you. You see, the guide pin on bowl body should face the drill mark on the distributor. So there's a right way of putting the distributor and there's a wrong way. I'll quickly try to show what's right and what's wrong. So the bottom part of this distributor,
Okay, so this part is getting a bit long. It's already 25 minutes. So I think I'll stop part one here, and I'll share the rest of the things in a different part. But no worries, I'll post both of the parts together. So thanks for your attention, everyone. Please go ahead and watch the second part. In the second part, I'll complete the whole dismantling process. Thank you for the attention.